Okay, thank you all. So as you said, I'm Nick Kirsch. I'm a Senior Product Manager at Isilon. I focus on our software, on our distributed operating system. So here I'm going to talk to you today about really the benefits of scale-out storage as it applies to large-scale server virtualization. So first, I kind of want to remind you all of the dream of virtualization and the promise that you're hopefully here for the show for and that you've signed up, which is business agility. What was the world like, if you can remember just a moment, for the physical world? You had a bunch of servers, you had an operating system and applications deployed on all those physical servers. Intel probably loved you because they were selling more of their CPUs, but ultimately it resulted in a bunch of inefficiencies. You had a bunch of CPUs that were underutilized. You had a bunch of complicated provisioning steps. You had to purchase more server equipment. You had lengthy times to deploy and provision that. So along came virtualization. It dramatically simplified the environment. Now you can deploy different operating systems, different applications right on top of your ESX server, one physical machine with many, many virtual machines on top of it. You're getting much better efficiency and utilization out of your hardware. You're simplifying your business processes. It's much easier for you to deploy new applications, new operating systems. Right? Everyone agrees with that? That's why we're here. Excellent. So in the end, it's value to you, right? You're saving money, less physical storage that you're purchasing. Ideally, you're saving actual valuable resource time because you're spending less time of your personnel resources deploying these things. So what's the big challenge with large-scale server virtualization environments? Today, analysts say that only 15% of the server virtualization market has really been penetrated. Why is that? Well, once you get to a certain point, our customers find that they're spending a lot of their time administering the storage. And that's really what I'm here to emphasize. So let's just talk about SAN and NAS environments, traditional environments. So back in the old days, you had a nice physical server, and that physical server was directly allocated to one LUN. You provisioned the LUN, you provisioned the volume, you knew what the application was going to do, you were able to line it up ahead of time, it didn't really change, right? That's not the way it works anymore. So instead, you've got this ESX server that's deployed for one LUN or multiple LUNs. What's actually happening up here? Well, you've got a bunch of VMs. They're moving around. They could be moving between ESX servers. The applications are changing. This operating system's hot. This application's hot, right? Things are moving around up here that you didn't initially expect when you deployed it. And certainly you weren't able to predict over time. The storage becomes a challenge for you. You didn't necessarily provision this LUN for performance or get the right performance. So you got to make sure you have the right VMs on this LUN, or you got to move VMs from this LUN to that LUN to make sure they're getting the performance you want. At the same time, you got a certain number of VMs on this LUN. You're only getting maybe 50% capacity out of this LUN because it can't deliver any more performance. So you're constantly playing this balancing act of trying to make sure that you use all of your physical hardware, your physical storage that you bought, and satisfy the performance needs of the application, right? Get some head nods, so I think people can agree with that. So NAS has a similar challenge. Not only do you have underlying LUNs and volumes, but you also have your filer heads. So the filer heads quickly become a bottleneck. What do you do when your filer head runs out of performance capacity? You got to buy another filer head. It's another point of management that you have to deal with. You now have to manage all these different volumes, these different filers. So this doesn't scale as the organization scales. A great example is Surgent, one of Isilon's customers, located directly across from our booth, where they were deploying they had eight traditional NAS systems, and they had 2 full-time equivalents managing those NAS systems. And they simply couldn't scale their business. They're a VM hosting provider. They have over 18,000 virtual machines that their customers run. So ultimately, they had to find something different, something that was going to be more scalable. So, what is the solution for large-scale server virtualization? Obviously, being from Isilon, I'm going to tell you that it is scale-out network-attached storage from Isilon. So what is scale-out network-attached storage? So to be clear, an Isilon system is based on commodity hardware, specifically using Intel CPUs, commodity memory, commodity disks. Each node has disks and memory and CPU. All these systems are actually connected together via a private dedicated InfiniBand backend, and together they form a single system for you. So a single large volume that you now can manage. So first of all, this is a lot easier, right? Instead of 8 things, you have one thing. It's much easier to scale. If you run out of performance in this system, what do? You add another one of these nodes. You didn't have to purchase a whole new system. You didn't have to do a forklift upgrade or migrate your data. Instead, this system just got bigger. Wow! You know, if you run out of rooms in your house, wouldn't it be great to just tack on another room? That's what this does. You've just added more capacity or more performance into your storage system. It's also extremely easy to manage, as you can imagine, even as you scale from, say, 6 terabytes up to 5 petabytes, one single system. So how does that help benefit virtualization? Well, we talked about some of the challenges, certainly were LUN and volume management. Hopefully you kind of get that you don't have to do that anymore. But what about the performance component? Well, if you think about this, when you deploy a virtual machine on an Isilon storage system, instead of putting that virtual machine on a particular LUN or volume where it's backed by a set number of disks, instead you're actually striping that virtual machine across these nodes. And these nodes all have disks, so you're ending up essentially putting the virtual machines all across the disks, all across the nodes. So any particular virtual machine gets hot, it's going to spin up data from a whole bunch of disks on a whole bunch of different nodes. So you can balance that performance and capacity need where you can put a bunch of VMs on here. The ones that get hot are going to be spun up automatically. It's not something you have to balance anymore. In addition, the Isilon system is actually fronted by a globally coherent cache. So every node that you add comes with commodity memory that we then turn into a cache. So any VM that gets hot is automatically has its disk blocks cached and then referenced via this InfiniBand network. So what does that buy your business, right? That's what you're here for. You're here to save money, here to save time. So hopefully I've demonstrated that it's much easier to use. It's much more simple. Maybe you get that. It's much more efficient from a capacity standpoint, right? You don't have a bunch of different buckets that you're trying to do a classic bin packing problem and make sure that they're all equal. Instead, you've got one big bucket. You fill it up as much as you can. If it gets too full, you add another node. In addition, this is going to dramatically change your cost structure, right? It's going to reduce your CapEx because you're only buying the storage that you need to. You're not over provisioning in terms of filers. You're not buying a very large filer when you don't need it because you have a bunch of nodes, commodity hardware based. You're not buying more disks than you need because you have a bunch of disks that are being underutilized. Instead, you're getting everything you need out of a single system. So in the end, better CapEx, better OpEx. In a lot of cases, it's going to accelerate time to market. It's going to allow you to focus on what you want to do, scale out your virtualized infrastructure. So we have a lot of great customers that have come to us with these specific challenges. Hey, I'm having trouble scaling my server environment, my virtualized environment. What am I going to do? They turn to Isilon and they see that they can deploy less OpEx in terms of going from 2 people managing 8 systems down to a quarter of a person that touches the system once a month. They go from a place where they spent 2 months trying to get a traditional NAS device up and running to the point where they had virtualized environment up in a single day. That's the benefits of a scale-out network attached system from Isilon.